Welcome to Popcast Deluxe, your I've always been too on of weekly cultural review. I'm John Caramanica, a critic at the New York Times.
I'm Joe Coscarelli. I'm a reporter at the New York Times.
Joe, the last 6 weeks in pop music, the last 8 weeks, everybody trying to get out, trying to have a summer banger, some trying harder than others, some not trying that hard and ending up with something anyway. I do feel like we're coming to the end of
The Glut?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Mans has other things to do. But it does feel like Billie Eilish putting out this album that came out on Friday hit me hard and soft.
Yep.
That does feel like the it does feel like the end of a thing.
Okay. It's like the denouement.
It does feel that way a little bit. Does it strike you like that? Like, aren't you tired?
You know who's tired? Dua Lipa. Episode coming soon. We're gonna get to that Dua Lipa album eventually. This is honestly, it's though this is the problem with the Dua Lipa album is
it's eminently bumpable.
Yeah, stuff just keeps elbowing it out of the way.
The Dua Lipa album, the way like I don't do a things to do list in like a classic way, which is to say like I write out 10 things and then like cross them out.
Sure.
I have like a never ending document on my computer, and I'll just like delete things and then move things up and rearrange them. Like the Dua Lipa album is the one that keeps getting like yeah. Like it's probably on like page 4 of the document right now. Anyway, respect and apologies.
Billie feels like not quite a grand finale, but especially because, and I want to talk about this, like the rollout has been both understated and then really kicked up, like the day the album came out, basically. Like Billie is the kind of artist now on her third album, has such a huge and dedicated fan base, is obviously permanent A-list for as long as she wants to be. So she can release a 10-song album with no single and have it still feel like an event.
Okay. Has Billie Eilish only have 3 albums?
I know.
Like when we were looking at the discography earlier, Billie Eilish quite literally just wins Grammys, probably for her Popcast Deluxe appearance, probably going to win a Grammy.
Yeah, Billie just opened her mouth.
Yeah.
Somebody hand her a Grammy right now.
Does feel that way.
Yeah.
So it's striking and kind of strange to me that Billie Eilish doesn't have more albums than she does.
Right, because she basically has 2 album cycles for songs that won Oscars, the Barbie one and the James Bond one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And which are not on her albums.
Right.
And also like the prior stuff, like the early stuff, the SoundCloud stuff, like that's
right. She also has the EPs.
Like, there's a cycle before the first album.
The Ocean Eyes era.
Yes. Yeah. But this Billie Eilish album, I think my note, Billie Eilish, I've always referred to her as the Tony Bennett of our times. I'm always saying Tony Bennett of our times. A singer who is a classicist, masking as edgy. I think probably edgy in her actual life, but I mean more in sort of like the aesthetics.
Sure.
The aesthetics of the sound.
Some edgy choices to dress up quite traditional
structures.
Balladry.
And also like her voice. Yep. I think she has a really good voice. It's powerful, it's husky, it has color and range in it, but she doesn't use a lot of it.
Sure, she has a whisper and then she has a wail, but the wail is like twice an album.
And I feel like, to me, of all contemporary pop stars except Dua Lipa, Billie Eilish has made the most of like a rather limited palette. I happen to really like almost all the Billie Eilish songs. I like all the Billie Eilish songs, but they do feel like very much within one band on the full spectrum. So I was very surprised by how this album sounds. This album does not sound like old Billie Eilish albums. First of all, before I tell you what it is, you want to say if you think it sounds like old Billie Eilish albums?
Well, it's once again her and her brother Phineas.
Always.
Locked in for album number 3. These kids love Radiohead. These kids really love Radiohead. I mean, they've always loved Radiohead, and there was touches of that, but felt it more here. I think there's some familiarity, and then there's some swerves. Like Billie Bossa Nova, you know, like they always love a little swing, a little backbeat. They return to a few of the same accents. But no, overall, I had more moments listening to this Billie Eilish album where I'm like, this sounds like something, and I can't quite place it. All right, let's hear it. What do you got?
Well, okay, just some broad thoughts. Like, obviously, one of the things that Phineas has done so well on prior Billie Eilish albums. Also, people still mad about the eyelash thing.
About you calling her Billie Eilish?
Yeah, like people still upset about that.
Was anyone ever upset?
Yeah, I feel like people were upset. It's in good fun. It's lighthearted. We tease because we love. Phineas is extremely gifted at filling all the space. Like, there's no negative space in Billie Eilish songs historically. He's filling a lot. Like, the through line, she has such a sturdiness in her vocal presentation, but what they don't do is lighten the things around her to make the voice the center. You feel like she's arriving in the middle of a kind of like pre-existing full spectrum soundscape. And I think they've done an incredible job of turning something that could have been dense and like almost like suffocating, but she's so tuneful, like she's so gifted structurally that she's able to like rescue sounds like that. I'm surprised with how much air there is on this record.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I noticed. What came to mind for me, British soul music, like contemporary British soul music, like Jessie Ware, Mabel, like people along those lines.
Yep.
Because I feel like you're hearing the kind of curves in Billie's voice more on this album than on prior albums. But really, we'll talk about what this album is about, but like in terms of where it sits in her career, this is her John Mayer continuum.
Wow. Okay.
This is her John Mayer continuum. It's taking like everything that predates Continuum is like John Mayer in mode. And Continuum is like, no, I make tuneful pop. And like, yes, like maybe you showed up because I can do the guitar well, or maybe you showed up because you thought I was handsome, or maybe you showed up because you thought I was a great singer. Probably not. But like, you showed up for those reasons. But then that's where the pivot in the career comes, where he's like, actually, I do much more. I'm capable of more things. This, it breathed in a way that earlier John Mayer records didn't breathe. This album, to me, breathes. And I think the point that they're trying to communicate is that, like, you know, goth Billie, emo Billie, whatever, you know, darkwave Billie, like that stuff is not what's going to define Billie Eilish moving forward.
Well, I do think it's most interesting that we mentioned the Oscar songs, like, she has become a ballads artist, like or the first album, you know, you have Bad Guy, you had the title track, you know, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? Spooky Sounds, like it was very like
great tour.
Yeah, amazing tour.
You went to the radio
spider. No, I saw like the smaller version before that. Yeah. But it was very much like, ooh, Billie is like, ooh, she's Marilyn Manson or something. You know, like that was like the head fake. And then Happier Than Ever, the second album was, you know, quieter. And then the Barbie song and the other Oscar song, very quiet. And then this album, I feel like it is almost that, but then every song has a beat switch where there's like something grander happening.
But does it feel lighter to you?
Yeah, it definitely feels lighter. I feel like they have like whatever synth presets they were on, you know, are like feathery, you know, like airy vibes for sure. And I think you're right that there's some soul. Like talking about specific tracks, like my favorite song on here, the one that's really stuck with me, is like probably the least Billie song on here, and it really sounds to me like Claro type beat or like Sky Ferreira type beat.
Which one?
Or Wet, and that's Birds of a Feather.
Wow, man, you said Wet.
Wet, you know, shout out to Wet. That's I'll disclose those are friends. But they really
not to be confused
sort of
with
like
Big Wet.
Not to be confused with Big Wet or the Kanye Wet tank tops, which
honestly missed opportunity. Yeah, candidly.
But Birds of a Feather has that like bouncy British soul thing. It's really like pretty pop. And to me, the reason I know it works is because I'm always so mad when really good writers use a cliche as the song title and the hook.
Yeah.
But when I can get past it, I'm
Then
like,
you know it's succeeding.
like I know it's working. But yeah, like we should listen to a little of Birds of a Feather. But to me, this is like, you know, this album, you can listen to it once and you're like, oh, it's pretty down tempo or whatever, and then the more I've listened to it, the more I've found like the hooks and the like secret pop moments that are hiding sometimes on the back half of some of these tracks, or like this one throughout.
And I don't know what I'm crying for. I don't think I could love you more. It might not be long, but maybe I'll love you till the day that I die. Till the day that I die.
So this album, well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the rollout of this album. Going back, talking about some of the press, Billie did a big Rolling Stone interview, very
Sexually forward.
yeah, very sexually frank, talking about coming into her sexuality, and that is very much the subject matter, certainly of the top half of this album.
Sure.
Very much the subject matter, and it does feel in the same way that there is, when you read that story, you see that push and pull between like, I'm like tossing off all the conventions of what people had asked of me previously, but I also understand that this too is kind of a performance. It's both at the same time. That's how I feel about these songs at the top of the album, where I'm like, wow, it's like incredibly sharp and astute and like really good songwriting, but also, you know, like they're so self-conscious in a way.
Right.
And it takes me out of the moment slightly, but on a baseline level, I think it's really refreshing to hear her sing like this. I think it's refreshing to hear her talk like this. When you go back to the first two, forget the soundtrack songs, when you go back to the first two albums, there's like a cloistering of Billie Eilish's emotion. The emotion is implicit because of what Phineas is doing, but sometimes I'm not getting the full range of it. That's kind of, I think, one of, as much as I like Billie Eilish music, there's always been a restraint in her vocal presentation that I think has kept me at a little bit of a distance from it. But I think on this go round, I feel much closer to the words. I feel much closer to the voice. I think in a literal sense, there's less, like Phineas is doing less. But I also, it's what happens when you grow up and become more comfortable and kind of like cut to the point.
It's interesting that you mentioned, though, the sort of frankness around sexuality or feeling or whatever it is, because I do think, like, I mean, like, Bad Guy is her breakthrough song, and that's, like, quite explicit for a teenage artist. And I think it's interesting. Billie is interesting as a teen star growing up because she came in on her own. Like, she didn't come with
Disney baggage.
with Disney or Nickelodeon or
Right.
you know, having to make G-rated or PG music. Like, she was always a little bit edgy in everything, but she did come.
Fan of XXXTentacion.
Yeah, famously. Yeah. But she did come with her family, which is the sort of like, that's her baggage.
And you spent some time with,
I spent some time in their house.
Yeah.
I know they slept in a family bed together, you know, well into childhood, the four of them. Very, very, very tight-knit family, homeschooled. I remember her parents telling me, I'll never forget, they were like, we've never spent a night away from them. Like, we never had a babysitter. Like, they were always together. And the fact that she makes this music with her brother, you know, and I think you saw her sort of shaking some of that off in the documentary that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about the documentary, which is like another product of kind of like, I'm showing you so much, and it's completely controlled and regulated.
It's just interesting to think of Billie growing up in public, but always feeling a certain level of freedom. But you still realize, like, even the bad girl teen artists, like, when they come of age in the public eye, they really feel that. Like, the opening song here, Skinny, she's talking about wearing less of the Billie Eilish baggy clothes, you know, the look. And she's like, people say I look so happy because I'm skinny, but, you know, the old me is the real me.
Wearing less and going out.
Yeah, wearing less and going out more. And then And then she gets to Lunch, which is the second track and the first single, which has a music video that
Yes.
came out over the weekend.
I could eat that girl for lunch as she dances on my tongue. Tastes like she might be the one. And I could never get enough. I could buy her so much stuff. It's a craving, not a crush. Just wanna get her off.
And that's the one where she's talking about same-sex attraction, same-sex lust, basically, and really, really going for it. And that was sort of that came hand in hand with the racy quotes from the Rolling Stone profile.
Hearing you talk about Bad Guy, which, yes, as subject matter, obviously felt very both learned and raw for someone at that age, but Bad Guy, as with a lot of Billie songs, like, every time I hear Bad Guy, I kind of imagine like a lounge singer doing like
Sure. Yeah.
Bad Guy. You know, like you sort of you kind of imagine it that way.
Yeah. You kind of imagine it that way.
And a lot of y'all could benefit from imagining it that way. But that's always kept, like I said, it's kept a little bit of a barrier between me and the subject matter. Whereas I do not experience anything like that, even though plenty of the songs here are incredibly tuneful, but they don't feel like standards. Like Lunch does not feel like a standard. Like Lunch is a catchy, damp statement of purpose about waking up and not waking up and wanting to never wake up from this fever dream of a new reality. And so to me, this feels like a positive, successful iteration that both acknowledges what Billie has been good at, but also makes a space for her to do a new thing without being mired in this old idea.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the rollout. The other thing she did, the day before this album came out was she did a listening party.
Kanye stands mad.
Yeah, and
Big
she did basically a full-scale arena concert in Brooklyn at Barclays.
Yep. Walking around the floor.
Walking around listening to her own music. It wasn't
Phineas
just
filming her. I think.
Yeah, the fog machine, all of that. That's like, I feel like they played very well with scale on this. It's like, it's a small, tight album. It came out relatively quietly, but then here's a big arena show where we can make it a thing. The other thing they did over the weekend was they released a vocals only version of it. Which they've said they wanted to do forever, which is like, it's very Radiohead, it's very Nine Inch Nails, it's like, remix us, whatever. There was a little murmurs of a pop star Cold War behind the scenes.
Okay, so as we said, it's been a very busy 6 to 8 weeks. Taylor, Tortured Poets Department, remains at the top of the album chart. And seemingly she wants to remain there, from what I can tell.
Yes.
Tell us what happened.
On the day of Billie Eilish's release, Taylor Swift put out some more digital deluxe.
You come to me
versions.
on the day of the release of Hit Me Hard and Soft with 3 vocal notes?
Yeah, releasing some voice memos that could juice her streaming numbers again and have her, I don't know, compete for another #1. Some people, including, made it all the way to TMZ, which I thought was interesting, took this as a shot at Billie for Billie maybe taking a swipe at Taylor's vinyl production, being like all these artists damaging the environment by creating the same versions of their albums for their fans to buy over and over again.
Dua Lipa.
You think Dua Lipa is making a dent in the ozone layer?
I just want to issue a challenge to Popcast listeners. If you own the 11 different versions of Radical Optimism, send a photo to us, and we're gonna reverse image search. So don't steal one off the Dua Lipa subreddit, okay? Dua Lipa Brazil Twitter account. Don't do that. I'd like to see a photo. Put the day's newspaper, like a hostage photo or something.
If you could find a newspaper.
Yeah. Please find a newspaper. I'd like to see
Popcast at NYTimes.com.
Yeah, please, Popcast at NYTimes. I'd love to see it.
We're coming back for you, Dua. But yeah, so then Billie comes back with the vocals only. I don't know. Is this is this manufactured? Is this? But it is good meta narrative. We talk about what pop stars need for their albums to succeed. Look, Billie's going to do numbers. She always does. Happier Than Ever, I would say maybe like didn't stick around like you would have expected for the second Billie Eilish album. This one, it's only 10 songs. I do think there's a couple sneaky hits in
Real
here.
hits, yep.
Songs that will be around for a while. Not to bring everything back to Taylor Swift, but you did notice there's a song called "Love of My Life" on here, but it's in French.
Sure is.
I know you as a LOML fan.
Yes.
From Tortured Poets.
I thought you were saying someone who's just fluent in French.
Yeah, and also someone who's fluent in. Do you consider yourself fluent?
Bien sûr que oui.
Okay, accent needs work. Even I know that.
I sound like Dua in the back of the cab.
Yeah, but this is. Dua, we're coming.
Je
we're coming.
voudrais aller à l'hôtel, monsieur.
But this is one of the songs with the big beat switch, and it has like an indie sleaze back half.
Oh yeah,
for
the
lack
back
of a
half
better term.
Yeah. The back half of this is pretty fascinating.
I couldn't place it. I was like, this is one of the things where I'm like, this is like a reference to something that I know in my bones, but I can't. I couldn't.
And you didn't land on it.
No,
No,
did you?
No,
Do you?
No, I agree. It's familiar, but nothing specific.
Yeah,
but
it sounds like
vibe.
it's like it's a little clubby.
Yeah, it's 04 maybe.
Yeah,
03,
that's
04.
American Apparel was calling out to me. When I heard this, obviously Billie was like not yet born,
No.
but was an infant. Any other songs in here that really spoke to you about either where Billie is now or where she and Phineas?
I mean, I really do think the first half of this album is better than the second half of this album. I'm just is it Birds of a Feather?
That's the one that I was talking about with the sort of like soul, little
think,
white R&B vibe.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think when I was listening to that, it's maybe the first time in my years of listening to Billie Eilish where I was like, huh. You did a thing with your, it's like a thing with your voice that I have not heard you do before.
Yeah, she sounds different.
Yeah, and but not different, but not troubled.
Mm-hmm.
Different, but not aspiring to something like this.
Comfortable.
Yeah, this has always been like metaphorically under the clothing. Like there's always been this, and I wonder, do you think okay? If you were to strip out the vocals, which they have, and I haven't listened to the stripped out vocals, do you think that these songs vocally are structured less rigorously than prior Billie Eilish songs?
Like on a song structure, like verse, chorus, verse level?
Yeah.
Maybe because every song is two songs, like I think there's a lot of hooks on here and some standard verses, but I think there are a lot of like sweets, and there's a song called Bittersweet on here that I think also has that going for it. But I think there's lots of pieces, and I do think I think she and Phineas think a little bit as collage artists and producers.
Historically, or on this specifically?
I think historically, and maybe this is just where it's really where they're really nailing it and it's coming into focus. But I do think because they're bedroom artists, you know what I mean? Like it both literally and figuratively. I think they're working on these songs next to each other for such long periods of time. They're pulling stuff from here and there. They're sampling weird things from their life, or I did like the joke where at the end, the very last thing you hear on the album is Billie saying, "So when can I hear the next one?" Which is like, I think there's a lot of textures that they're playing with and a lot of inside jokes between them, and I do think like they're pulling pieces from different sessions and whatever, and I feel like that's pretty well realized on this album.
What do you think that this album says about the kind of pop star that Billie Eilish intends to become? Because I think prior to this album, what I would have said is, frankly, something of a stubborn pop star, committed to not an unpopular style, but maybe not a bright style, maybe not a reach out and give you a hug and smile at you kind of style.
Definitely not that.
Maybe more like a console you when you're sad kind of style. But she and Phineas felt really committed to it. This is the first moment where I'm like, is she, again, not conventional, but like, is there forgive me, an Adele album in her future? Adele style, like is she gonna go in a breathier, heavier, but not claustrophobic direction? Does she want to make songs that are more frank in terms of, like, obviously there's a lot of sexual frankness on this album, but does she want to do things where the lyrics themselves are a little bit tighter, a little bit punchier, a little bit, I want to communicate a mood, but is she doing something that's like, I want to be chit-chatty and have smaller phrases and kind of conversational in a way? Like, Billie's never felt conversational to me before.
I think she's always had some version of that. I still see this as a quite stubborn album. I still think they feel like we're going to do only what we want to do. We're going to live in our own little world, at least until we don't as the duo. And yeah, it's not really in conversation with whatever else. Like, there's no Post Malone feature on here. You know what I mean? There's no like acoustic guitar. There's no, like, I still think Billie is going to be auteurist, like in a very specific way that I think a lot of other pop stars at the moment want to be seen that way, but are not actually. And I think she's on her own path, and I think people will have to come to her. As far as, like, I guess I don't think her previous stuff, this only feels a shade different. Like, I think if you're listening to this not that closely, it's, of course this is a Billie Eilish album. Like, I do think she's had conversational lyrics. I do think, like, she's always been a pretty good, economical, not that mystical of a writer. I think, like, I think she's, like, she's internet-y, and I mean that, like, as a compliment. Like, I think that she conveys, like, an intimacy that speaks to, people her age. I do wonder if she's, like, I wonder if her fans are aging with her, or if young people are continuing to discover her, because I do feel like she's not really the cool new thing. Like, I don't think she has the Olivia Rodrigo fans necessarily, but I don't think she wants them.
No, although I will say, and I wonder what your experience of going to Billie shows has been. I was expecting, and this is, of course, a few years ago at this point, but, like, when I went to the Radio City show, I remember walking in and thinking, like, it's going to be, like, all the edgiest teenage girls in New York. And it wasn't that.
It was just all the teenage girls in the tri-state area.
Yeah. And so I do think maybe there is more overlap in the Billie and Olivia fan bases than maybe you would see.
But I think now they have less to grab onto. I think she's, like, weird enough. She's quiet enough. She only pops out really when she wants. Like, I think she's on her own planet, and I think that's where she belongs and where she wants to be. I don't think she's at the center of anything.
Okay, but how have we gotten this far into the conversation without saying the word Lorde?
Yeah, I think she's on the Lorde path.
Right, but, like, here's the thing. The Lorde path is, I think, Lorde, I mean, Melodrama is, I think, going to be the album that stands in for, like, pop star Refusnik turns for the next 10 to 20 years. I fundamentally believe that the music that Lorde wants to make is eccentric, angular. I don't want to go so far as to say avant-garde in any way, but certainly Lorde, I think, wants to make music that doesn't go down as easily as Royals. Yeah. I think that would be Lorde's preference. I don't think that's what Billie Eilish wants.
I don't either.
I think Billie Eilish wants to make music that goes down very easily. I think she wants to find another approach to doing that, which is why I actually don't, like, when I first was feeling like, oh, this record's so different, the first thing that popped to mind was Lorde. And I was like, no, she's not doing that, because she's not extending a middle finger to the universe.
But I have a reason for that. And I've talked to both of them about this, actually, which is that Lorde had a song that was bigger than she was ever going to be.
Yeah.
Royals, one of the biggest songs of the modern era.
Yeah.
It was bigger than her as an artist, and it came first. It was the first thing people heard. Billie, they made very clear, probably with Lorde on the bulletin board, it was her career was built very deliberately to never have a song be bigger than her.
Yeah.
And that's why she was able to get this critical mass through releasing the EPs, never sending a song to radio. Like, they didn't push Ocean Eyes. Like, if they wanted Ocean Eyes, the first SoundCloud hit, to be Royals, it probably could have happened, but they they hit the brakes and they let her create a visual identity, a sonic identity, and they went very slowly. And I think that's why she'll never feel the need to do what Lorde did, and Lorde knew, and same thing when I talked to Lorde around Solar Power, she was like, I didn't even have to worry about trying to make another Royals because it's impossible. Like it was such a lightning in a bottle moment. And I think that set them on different paths, and Billie can always be popular as Billie no matter what music she makes, whereas Lorde actually did have to shake something off and say, you'll never get this from me again, which is why on Solar Power there's literally one 808 sound, and it's only when she's referencing her old music.
Yeah, sure. Should we go out with something from Melodrama?
Yeah, why not?
Writer in the Dark.
Oh, okay.
I am my mother's child. I love you till my breathing stops. I love you till you call the cops on me. But in our darkest hours, I stumbled on a secret power.